Emily and I were the couple everyone envied. That's what people said anyway. We had the perfect blend of companionship and passion. We were best friends and lovers, partners who could spend hours talking about anything or nothing at all. Every Friday night, we had our tradition, wine on the couch, talking until one of us inevitably fell asleep. It was our time, a sacred ritual that anchored our marriage. And on one of those nights, a single question from Emily shattered everything I thought I knew about us. Do you ever wonder what it'd be like to sleep with someone else? The words hit me mid-sip, and I almost choked on my wine. I stared at her, searching for the telltale signs of a joke, but she just watched me, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "Where's this coming from?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She shrugged, her cheeks flushed from the wine. "I was just thinking, you and I have only ever been with each other. Don't you wonder what it's like out there?" "No," I said firmly. "I've never thought about it." She laughed, but it was a nervous laugh, the kind that didn't quite meet her eyes. "Well, I do. Not because I'm unhappy or anything, it's not that, I've been curious. That's all." Her words lingered in the air, heavy and unsettling. I didn't know what to say. In all our years together, I'd never once doubted her love for me, and I certainly never imagined her wanting anyone else. I tried to brush it off as drunken musings, but something about the way she looked at me told me this wasn't just idle chatter. A few days later, she brought it up again. This time, there was no wine involved, just her sitting across from me at the breakfast table, nervously stirring her coffee. "Have you thought about what I said the other night?" she asked. I froze. So it wasn't a one-time thing. "You mean the whole sleeping with other people thing?" She winced. "I know how it sounds, but I've been thinking, what if we tried an open marriage? Just for a little while, like a month, no strings attached, just an experiment." The word experiment made me bristle. Our marriage wasn't some science project to be tinkered with. "You're serious?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. "I don't want you to take this the wrong way," she said quickly. "I love you. I love us. I just think maybe this could make us stronger. You know, get all that curiosity out of our system so we don't look back and regret anything." Regret? That word stung. Did she already regret being with me? "I don't know, Emily," I said, leaning back in my chair. "This isn't exactly something you can just undo if it goes wrong." Her eyes softened, and she reached across the table to grab my hand. "I wouldn't even think about it if I wasn't sure we could handle it. We've been through so much together. We're solid. This won't change that. It'll just give us some perspective. Perspective. Another word that felt foreign in the context of our relationship. I didn't answer right away. How could I? The idea of sharing Emily with someone else was nauseating. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the look in her eyes, hopeful, pleading. "Okay," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "1 month, but only if we're completely honest with each other." Her face lit up, and she squeezed my hand. "You won't regret this, I promise." But as I watched her leave the table, relief evident in her stride, a sinking feeling settled in my gut. It didn't take long for the first cracks to appear. A few days after our agreement, Emily came home from work with a glow I hadn't seen in years. She was practically bouncing as she put her bag down and kicked off her shoes. "Good day?" I asked, trying to sound normal. "Yeah," she said, hesitating for a moment. "Actually, there's something I need to tell you. Here it comes," I thought. "So, one of my co-workers, Jason, asked me out today," she said, her voice careful. "I told him yes." My heart dropped. Hearing the words out loud made everything feel so much more real. "Jason?" I repeated, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Yeah, he's a project manager. We've worked together a few times. He's nice." Nice. That word felt like a dagger. "When's this happening?" I asked, fighting to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Tomorrow night," she said. "I just wanted to be upfront about it." I nodded, my stomach churning. "Okay, thanks for telling me." She smiled, leaning down to kiss my cheek. "This is going to be good for us. You'll see. Good for us." I couldn't imagine how. The next evening, I watched her get ready for her date. She wore a dress I hadn't seen in years, one that hugged her figure in a way that used to drive me wild. She put on makeup with the kind of care she hadn't shown in months, and when she spritzed on her favorite perfume, it was all I could do to stay composed. "How do I look?" she asked, turning to face me. "Beautiful," I said honestly, though the word felt like ash in my mouth. She smiled and kissed me on the cheek. "Don't wait up." And just like that, she was gone. The house felt emptier than it ever had. I tried to distract myself, flipping through TV channels, but nothing held my attention. My mind kept drifting to her, sitting across from Jason, laughing at his jokes, maybe touching his arm. The thought of her with someone else was unbearable, and yet I couldn't stop picturing it. When she came home later that night, her face was flushed, her eyes bright. "How was it?" I asked, my voice tight. "It was nice," she said, smiling as she kicked off her shoes. "Jason's really sweet. We had a good time." Sweet, nice, good. Her words felt like tiny cuts, each one drawing blood. I nodded, pretending to be okay. But inside, I was unraveling. Over the next week, things only got worse. She went on 2 more dates with Jason, each one leaving her more radiant and me more hollow. She started texting him in the evenings, laughing at messages I couldn't see. Meanwhile, I was drowning in jealousy and insecurity. I hated the idea of her with another man. But more than that, I hated how easily she seemed to embrace this new arrangement. "Have you gone out with anyone yet?" she asked one night as we sat on the couch. The question caught me off guard. Not yet," I lied. "You should," she said, her tone encouraging. "This is supposed to be fun for both of us, remember?" Fun. The word made my skin crawl. But in that moment, something shifted in me. If she could do this so easily, maybe I could too. And just like that, the idea of revenge started to take root. Emily's enthusiasm for her new freedom was palpable. She was happier, livelier, and more radiant than I'd seen her in years. At first, I told myself that maybe she was right, that this experiment could bring us closer. But the more I watched her get dressed for dates, laugh at texts from Jason, and come home glowing, the more I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. I couldn't stop thinking about her with him. I didn't even know the guy, but I hated him with every fiber of my being. What was he giving her that I couldn't? What was she feeling when she was with him? It wasn't just jealousy eating away at me. It was humiliation. This wasn't the life I'd signed up for, and yet I'd agreed to it. Out of fear? Out of pride? I wasn't sure anymore. By the second week, her dates with Jason had become a regular thing. She didn't bother hiding it either. "Jason's taking me to this new sushi place tomorrow," she said one night, scrolling through her phone as we sat on the couch. "Sounds nice," I muttered, my jaw clenched. "It's supposed to be amazing. I'll let you know how it is," she said, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. She'd let me know? What the hell was I supposed to do with that? That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I thought we were partners, equals. But now it felt like she was thriving while I was left to pick up the pieces of my crumbling self-esteem. The next day, I decided to take her advice. I downloaded a dating app, more out of spite than actual interest. Swiping through profiles felt surreal, like I was trying on a life that didn't belong to me. None of the faces on the screen meant anything, but I forced myself to keep going. When I finally matched with someone, a woman named Sarah, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Sarah seemed nice enough, and she was eager to meet up. But as the date approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was betraying Emily, which was insane considering she was probably out with Jason at that very moment. The date was awkward. I met Sarah at a small bar downtown, and while she was perfectly pleasant, I couldn't focus. I kept comparing her to Emily, her laugh, her smile, the way she tilted her head when she spoke. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was doing something wrong. When I got home that night, Emily was already in bed. She didn't ask how it went, and I didn't offer any details. The whole thing felt hollow, pointless. Meanwhile, Emily and Jason were practically inseparable. She started seeing him 3 or 4 times a week, each date pulling her further away from me. I tried to act like it didn't bother me, but the truth was I was drowning. "You're quiet tonight," she said one evening as we sat at the dinner table. "Just tired," I lied, poking at my food. She reached across the table to touch my hand. "You're okay with this, right? With everything?" Her question caught me off guard. Was I okay? No. But admitting that felt like admitting defeat. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Of course." She studied me for a moment, her brow furrowing. "You'd tell me if you weren't, wouldn't you?" "Absolutely," I lied. That night, I found myself scrolling through my phone, debating whether to text Sarah again. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself that I could make this work, it all felt wrong. And that's when I thought of Rachel. Rachel had been Emily's best friend since college. She was confident, outspoken, and unapologetically flirtatious. Over the years, we'd developed a playful rapport, nothing inappropriate, but enough to make me wonder on rare occasions, what if? With everything falling apart, the idea of Rachel took on a new appeal. She was close enough to the situation to understand, but far enough removed to make it feel like a small rebellion, a way to take back control. I reached out to Rachel the next day under the guise of needing advice. "Hey, can we grab a drink sometime? I could use someone to talk to," I texted. Her response was immediate. "Of course. Name the time and place." When we met up, Rachel was her usual charismatic self. She listened as I vented about the open marriage, nodding sympathetically as I poured out my frustrations. "You're a better man than me," she said, taking a sip of her drink. "I'd never be able to handle something like this." "Yeah, well, I'm not exactly handling it," I admitted, staring into my glass. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know, Em's been talking about how great this has been for her. But what about you? Have you explored?" Her question felt like a challenge. "Not really," I said. "I tried, but it's not the same," Rachel smirked, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Maybe you're just looking in the wrong places." The first time we crossed the line, it was both exhilarating and devastating. Rachel wasn't subtle about her intentions, and in my vulnerable state, I didn't resist. Afterward, as I lay in her bed, the weight of what I'd done hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just about revenge or proving a point. This was something I couldn't take back. "You okay?" Rachel asked, her tone unusually soft. "Yeah," I lied, staring at the ceiling, but I wasn't. When I told Emily, her reaction was exactly what I'd expected, and so much worse. "You slept with Rachel?" she asked, her voice shaking. I nodded, unable to meet her eyes. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. Then, without warning, she slapped me across the face. "You're disgusting," she spat. "I trusted you, and you go behind my back with her?" "Behind your back?" I snapped. "You've been parading Jason around like he's your new boyfriend. Don't act like you're innocent in all this." "This is different," she yelled, her voice cracking. "She was my best friend. How could you—" She broke off, her words lost in a choked sob. The sight of her crying, her body trembling with anger and hurt, cut deeper than any insult she could have thrown at me. For the first time, I realized the full extent of the damage we'd done to each other, and it was irreparable. That night, she slept in the guest room. The silence between us was deafening, and I knew, deep in my gut, that we'd crossed a line we could never uncross. The days following my confession were unbearable. Emily moved through the house like a ghost, her once vibrant presence replaced with cold, empty silence. She didn't yell at me again. She didn't slam doors or throw things. She didn't even cry. That was the worst part. Her quiet detachment, as if I were a stranger she had no desire to know anymore. I tried to talk to her, to explain myself, but every attempt was met with a wall of indifference. "There's nothing left to say," she told me one morning, her voice flat. "You made your choice and I can't unsee it." Her words echoed in my head as I went about my day, a hollow shell of the man I used to be. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The guilt was suffocating, but so was the resentment. I wanted to blame her for starting this, for suggesting the open marriage in the first place. But deep down, I knew that my decisions, my actions, had driven the final nail into the coffin of our marriage. The next Friday night, the night that used to be ours, Emily went out. She didn't tell me where she was going, and I didn't ask. I just sat on the couch, staring at the clock, waiting for her to come home. When she finally walked through the door, it was past midnight. Her hair was slightly tousled, her cheeks flushed. She didn't say a word as she dropped her purse on the counter and headed straight to the bedroom. I followed her, my chest tight with anxiety. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Out," she said simply, pulling off her earrings. "With Jason?" She paused, meeting my gaze in the mirror. "Does it matter?" Her words cut deeper than I expected. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. What could I say? I'd forfeited any right to judge her when I slept with Rachel. The following week, I found myself replaying every moment of our relationship, searching for the cracks that had led us here. Had she been unhappy for longer than I realized? Had I been too blind, too complacent? Or was this just the inevitable result of two people trying to hold on to something that was never meant to last? Emily and I had always been different. She was logical, measured, and practical, while I was passionate, emotional, and impulsive. Those differences had once felt complementary, like two halves of a whole, but now they felt like opposing forces, pulling us apart. I couldn't help but wonder if Jason was more her speed, calm, stable, predictable. The thought made my stomach churn. One evening, as we sat on opposite ends of the couch, Emily finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking about us," she said, her voice quiet but firm. I turned to her, my heart pounding. "And?" She took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I don't think we can come back from this." The air left my lungs in a rush. "Emily, please, no," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "Let me finish." She looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't hate you, but I can't forgive you, and I don't think I want to try anymore." Her words hit like a freight train, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. "So, that's it?" I finally managed. "You're just giving up?" She shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'm not giving up. I'm accepting that we've both changed too much to keep pretending this is working. We broke something, and it's not fixable." I wanted to argue, to fight for her, but deep down, I knew she was right. We'd pushed each other too far, crossed too many lines. There was no going back to the way things were. 2 weeks later, she handed me divorce papers. "I didn't want it to end this way," she said, her voice trembling as she slid the papers across the table. "But it's better than dragging this out and hurting each other even more." I stared at the papers, my vision blurring. "This isn't what I wanted," I whispered. "It's not what I wanted either," she said, her tone soft but resolute. "But sometimes love isn't enough." Her words echoed in my mind as I signed my name, each stroke of the pen feeling like a final nail in the coffin of our marriage. In the weeks that followed, the house became a shell of what it once was. Emily packed her things and moved out, leaving, behind an emptiness that was almost unbearable. The silence was deafening, and the memories of our life together haunted every corner. One day, I found a box of old photos tucked away in the closet. Pictures of us on vacations, at weddings, laughing and smiling like we had the whole world ahead of us. I stared at them for hours, trying to reconcile the couple in those photos with the strangers we'd become. Months later, I ran into Emily at a coffee shop. She was with Jason. They were sitting by the window laughing over their drinks. She looked happy, radiant even. For a moment, I thought about going over to say hello, but I stopped myself. Instead, I sat in my car, watching them from a distance. Seeing her like that, with someone else, felt like a dagger to the heart. But it also brought a painful clarity. This was my reality now. The woman I'd once called my wife, my partner, my everything, was building a new life without me. Looking back, I realized the open marriage wasn't the cause of our downfall. It was a symptom of deeper issues we'd ignored for too long. The cracks in our foundation had been there all along. We just hadn't wanted to see them. I thought love would be enough to carry us through anything. I thought we were unbreakable. But I was wrong. In the end, we destroyed each other in ways I never thought possible. And now, all I have left is regret. Some doors once opened can never be closed.